Nearly every country in the world is in debt. The United States' debt has now surpassed $38 trillion, the highest level in its history. The European Union carries around $14 trillion in debt. Japan's debt exceeds $9 trillion. Even oil-rich Saudi Arabia, export giants like Germany, and China itself carry massive debt burdens. But here's the simple question that confuses people. If everyone is in debt, then who exactly is the debt owed to? That question takes us to the intersection of money, power, and history. And one thing needs to be said up front. Nothing is as simple as it looks. Debt isn't just a weight on our backs. It is, in fact, the structural backbone of the modern world. Every war, every crisis, every rise, and every collapse has been built on these invisible frameworks. And if you follow the chain of creditors long enough, you eventually run into a slightly unsettling truth. The world is not indebted to a single person or a single country. The world is indebted to itself. But that does not mean everyone benefits from this system equally. Today, total global debt has exceeded $315 trillion. That figure is nearly 3 times the size of the global economy. How did we get here? To understand that, you have to go much further back than credit cards or digital money transfers. The idea of national debt wasn't born on Wall Street, it was born in war. In 1694, England was at war with France and gold had run out. The king turned to merchants for a solution. He offered them a simple deal: regular interest payments guaranteed by future tax revenues. In return, the merchants financed the state. To manage the system, the Bank of England was founded. This was revolutionary because now the state could spend money it didn't yet have, and the lenders received something priceless, a promise from the state, one that could be bought and sold. That is how government bonds, the cornerstone of modern finance, were born. France copied the idea. The Netherlands refined it. Newly independent America followed the same path to finance its revolution and westward expansion. Over time, national debt stopped being seen as a sign of failure. Instead, it became a measure of credibility. The ability to borrow meant the ability to manage money. Empires once conquered land for gold. Now they issued bonds for interest. The battlefield was replaced by the balance sheet. Today, debt has become the world's most common product. The United States owes $38 trillion. Japan owes over $9 trillion. Global debt grows by roughly $1 trillion every 100 days. Every country is in debt. Every bank issues credit. Every citizen becomes both a debtor and a creditor at the same time through taxes, savings, and pension systems. So who's holding the other end of the rope? Let's start with the United States, because its debt is not just national, but global. Roughly half of that $38 trillion is owned by investors, most of whom are American. Banks, pension funds, investment funds, insurance companies, and the Federal Reserve. Around $9 trillion is held by foreigners. Japan holds the largest share at about $1 trillion, followed by China with roughly $800 billion. Then come the UK, Luxembourg, and Belgium. So saying the US owes China is technically true, but only for a small fraction of the total. Most of America's debt is owed to America itself. The Treasury issues bonds, banks and funds buy them, and the Federal Reserve often buys them back, creating new dollars in the process. Americans pay taxes. Those taxes return as interest payments and flow into retirement accounts. It's a perfectly circular mirror. The debt is real, but the creditor often comes from within the same system. This cycle isn't unique to the US. It's global. Japan lends, the US borrows through bonds. Money flows to developing countries through the IMF and World Bank. Those countries then invest their reserves back into Western bonds. It's like a global game of hot potato. Everyone is holding someone else's promise. There's only one rule: no one leaves the table. But there's another layer: market. This is where real power lives. Pension funds, hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks controlling trillions of dollars decide who bleeds cheaply and who survives at a cost. When confidence disappears, currencies collapse and governments fall. Democracy decides who governs. Markets decide who endures. At the center of this system are central banks. They don't just manage debt, they create it. When they buy a bond, they create new money. One person's debt becomes another person's asset. Every unit of currency in circulation is tied to a debt record somewhere. There is no such thing as debt-free money. This system has stood on trust for decades, but we've seen what happens when trust breaks. Greece, Argentina, Sri Lanka. When debt becomes unpayable, austerity, unemployment, and political collapse follow. The same cycle begins again. New debt replaces old debt. Because in the modern world, debt doesn't exist to be repaid, it exists to be rolled over. Governments do not plan to eliminate their debt. This isn't a secret, it's policy. Debt is continuously refinanced, interest becomes the system's real product. The US will never fully pay off its debt, neither will Japan, because if they did, the world would lose its safest financial instrument. Debt is the heart of the system. That's why the phrase, "we will eliminate the debt," is an illusion. The goal isn't to erase debt, it's to keep trust alive. Because when trust disappears, numbers lose their meaning. That is the secret of sovereign debt. The plan was never repayment. The plan was to make everyone believe repayment would happen. And finally, don't forget this. Debt doesn't just flow between countries, it flows between people. Interest rates rise, inequality grows, creditors and debtors are parts of the same system. The real question is what happens if that system ever stops? If this gave you a different perspective, subscribe. History holds the answers. I'll show you where to look.